Imagine this. Two young girls just playing out in a park, and then suddenly their day just completely shatters. They find something so awful, it kicks off a mystery that lasts for decades. Just a single piece of evidence, a horrifying one, seemingly just tossed aside. It baffled investigators for nearly 30 years, but it also, well, it really captured the attention of people online. So today we're going to talk about the incredible, really unsettling story of Ina Jane Doe. It's a case that went cold, stayed cold for almost 3 decades, and it really shows how persistence, sheer curiosity, and eventually modern science finally gave a name back to someone who'd been forgotten. Our mission today is to walk through the details, sometimes the really difficult details, of this investigation. We'll look at the huge challenges the police faced back then, the weirdly important role of one quite disturbing piece of evidence,
and how DNA technology, forensic genealogy finally brought answers that honestly nobody expected. We're pulling this from a narrative that lays out all the twists and turns. Okay, let's get into it. Let's set the scene.
It's January 27th, 1993. Wayne Fitzgerrell State Park, Illinois. 2 girls, they're young, 10 and 12, just playing, running around a campground, and they stumble upon something absolutely gruesome. Tangled up in a bush, like someone just threw it from a moving car, was a woman's severed head. The girls, well, obviously terrified, they immediately called for help.
Yeah, and what's immediately striking here and incredibly difficult for the investigators is what they found next. Or rather, they didn't find. They searched the whole area, a really thorough search, but nothing. No other body parts. Zero. That just instantly complicated everything. A real puzzle right from square one.
Wow. So just the head. And with nothing to identify her, they had to call her something. They went with Ina Jane Doe, right? After a village nearby.
Exactly. Ina, Illinois.
So when you're faced with something like that, just a head, what are the first, massive problems for investigators trying to figure out who this person is?
Oh, it's an absolute nightmare scenario. They could tell some basic things, sure. She was Caucasian, her hair was reddish-brown, about shoulder length. They estimated her age somewhere between 30 and 50. Her face was still fairly recognizable, suggesting she hadn't been dead long, maybe 2 weeks max. And forensics indicated she was likely dead before the decapitation. The cut itself was clean, very clean, which suggested it was done by someone pretty strong.
But without the rest of the body?
Exactly. You can't estimate height, weight, there's no clothing, no jewelry, no personal items at all. And critically, no missing persons reports in that immediate area matched her description. That straight away suggested she wasn't local, which blows the investigation wide open. Think about it, hundreds of thousands of missing people across the U.S. back then, and DNA tech was pretty limited compared to now. Finding her identity, let alone her killer, seemed almost impossible.
Right. An impossible task. So with 0 leads, they turned to the public for help, and they used this composite sketch, an e-fit, which people found really, really creepy, unsettlingly so. Why would they do that? Why make something so sort of ghoulish if you're trying to get people to help identify her? Doesn't that just weird people out?
Well, it's an interesting point about forensic art strategies. Sometimes artists intentionally enhance or even exaggerate key features. The idea is to make the image memorable, make it stick in someone's mind. If it's too generic, it might look like, hundreds of people. You remember that e-fit in the Madeleine McCann case? Some people online thought it looked like Ghislaine Maxwell just because it was, quite non-specific. So a unique feature, even if it's played up a bit, might just trigger the right memory in someone.
Okay, that makes a kind of strategic sense, aiming for memorable over maybe perfectly accurate. But it sounds risky, too. Couldn't it backfire? Make her seem, less human or make people doubt the sketch?
It's definitely a calculated risk, yes. And with Ina Jane Doe, this is where it gets really specific and quite interesting. They found out that in life, she had a condition called chronic spasmodic torticollis.
Wry neck syndrome.
That's right, wry neck. It affects the neck muscles, can make the neck look tilted or crooked. So the artist took that information and deliberately depicted her with a twisted neck in the official e-fit, and also gave her quite extreme facial asymmetry. They were basically amplifying the one really distinct piece of information they had. They weren't sure how severe her condition actually was. They had so little to go on, so they highlighted it, hoping it would click with someone who knew her.
And it seems like it worked. In a strange way. Other images were made later, less extreme ones, but it was that original, that really creepy e-fit that people remembered and kept talking about online for years, even decades. But sadly, even though everyone was talking about it, nobody actually called in to say, hey, I know her.
No, not at the time.
It's almost like the weirdness of it kept her in the public eye, even if it didn't solve the case right away. Maybe that strangeness was what stopped her from just becoming another forgotten Jane Doe statistic.
That's a really insightful way to put it, actually. That lasting fascination, even if unsettling, probably did play a role later on. It kept the case alive in people's minds.
But back then, the lack of identification led to a pretty grim thought for investigators, right? That maybe she was someone with no connections, a loner, maybe transient.
Exactly. Someone nobody knew well enough to miss or report missing, which is incredibly sad in itself.
And infuriating for the police because it meant her killer could just vanish, get away with it completely.
And then, during that initial phase, something else disturbing happened. An employee at a nearby rest stop close to where the head was found reported some graffiti. Really ominous stuff.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about this in a bathroom stall.
It read, "Serial killer, March 9319, and counting 5 men, 12 women, 2 children, a black 8, white 3, Hispanic descending. Don't worry, I'll get to the others."
Wow, chillin'.
Yeah. And they never figured out if it was real, a genuine confession or just some sick prank. But the timing, March 93, right after she was found, and the location, it was deeply suspicious. It just highlights the kind of psychological pressure those investigators were under.
Yeah.
Trying to sort real threats from noise and cruel jokes while dealing with this horrific discovery.
And then, like so often happens in these cases, especially Doe cases, after that initial flurry, the graffiti, the e-fit, things just seemed to go quiet, didn't they? The trail went cold.
It did, unfortunately. No solid leads emerged. The sheer number of missing persons, the limits of the tech back then, the case just stalled. It became one of those tragic frozen cold cases.
But thankfully, not everyone forgot. Interest didn't totally die out. And one person who really took an interest, who couldn't let it go, was Dr. Amy Michael.
Right, she's a professor at the University of New Hampshire, but she's actually from Illinois. And she'd apparently been intrigued, maybe haunted is a better word, by the Ina Jane Doe case for a long time.
So what did she do?
Well, fast forward to 2021. Nearly 30 years later, she contacts the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. She offers her lab's resources, the modern forensic techniques, specifically investigative genetic genealogy, to try and finally identify the victim.
And this is where things take a turn nobody saw coming.
Absolutely. A huge turn.
So on March 11th, 2022, think about that. 29 years after her head was found in that bush, they finally had an answer. Because of these amazing advances in genetic genealogy using public DNA databases, Dr. Michael's team managed to find a potential familial link. They identified likely relatives.
And they reached out to a suspected sister. She agreed to provide a DNA sample, and it was a perfect match, confirmed.
After all that time.
Ina Jane Doe finally got her name back. It was Susan Hope Lund.
Susan Hope Lund. And the reality of who she was is just heartbreaking. A 25-year-old mother, she had 3 young children, and she disappeared on Christmas Eve, 1992.
And she was pregnant at the time of her disappearance.
Pregnant? Oh my God. She'd apparently gone to the grocery store that evening, just needed to buy a pie for Christmas dinner, and also use the payphone there to call her sister because they didn't have a phone at home.
And she didn't have a car either, so she walked.
Walked to the store on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. And this just underlines the tragedy and the distance. Susan lived in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's, 175 miles away from where her head was eventually found in Illinois. Her husband, her kids, they'd been searching, waiting, wondering for almost 3 decades, living with that absolute unknown. They were left without answers for longer than Susan had actually been alive. It's just devastating.
And her husband, Paul, he lived under the shadow of suspicion for years, didn't he? Local rumors suggesting he might have been involved.
He did, which is awful, because detectives confirmed he was home looking after their kids when Susan must have been abducted. He had an airtight alibi. But tragically, Paul actually passed away shortly before Susan was finally identified. He never got to know what happened to her, and he never got that public clearing of his name either. Just carried that weight until the end.
That's another layer of just immense sadness in this story. The human cost is unbelievable.
It really is. And the early search for Susan was actually hampered by false leads. Specifically, there was this anonymous phone call in March 1993. A woman called the authorities claiming she was Susan.
Claiming to be Susan, what did she say?
She said she was alive, she was fine, but she didn't want to be found. Just wanted to be left alone.
Okay, now that we know it was Susan's head found just weeks before that call seems incredibly suspicious. How did it impact the initial search for her?
Massively. And negatively. Based almost entirely on that one anonymous, unverified call. Believe it or not, most officers just assumed Susan had run off. They effectively closed her missing person case.
Without checking who made the call.
Apparently not thoroughly enough.
Yeah.
And the result was her children grew up believing their mother had abandoned them. Imagine carrying that belief, that hurt, for decades.
Yeah.
All stemming from one unchecked, possibly malicious phone call.
That's staggering. A single unchecked call derailed everything, let a killer walk free, and condemned a family to decades of pain and false belief. Unbelievable.
It highlights a critical failure point in that early stage.
So now we know who she was, where she lived. What else can we piece together about that night, Christmas Eve, her walk to the store?
Well, one thing that stands out is the distance she was walking. 8 miles to the store, so a 16-mile round trip on foot. That's a long way, especially for a pregnant woman.
Yeah, that's quite a trek.
It seems highly likely she wasn't planning to walk the whole way back, at least. She probably planned to hitchhike. We know she made it to the store because she made that call to her sister. And her sister said she sounded happy. They were talking about Christmas plans. So she likely got a ride to the store okay, maybe from a good Samaritan. But it seems tragically likely that whoever she got a ride back with, well, they weren't a good Samaritan at all.
And even now, even knowing it was Susan, her killer is still out there, still a mystery.
Still unknown, yes.
And so many other questions still hang in the air, like, who was that woman who called pretending to be Susan? Was she involved somehow? Or just someone playing a truly twisted game?
We don't know.
And that graffiti and the rest stuff, was it connected to Susan's murder after all? Or just a horrible coincidence?
Another unanswered question.
Yeah.
Very disturbing either way.
And the biggest, most heartbreaking one, where is the rest of her body? And the body of her unborn child? Only her head was ever recovered.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jefferson County Sheriff Jeff Bullard has said quite clearly, our mission is still to find the truth about what happened to Susan. The investigation is technically still active. They haven't given up hope of finding the perpetrator.
It's quite something. And looking back at that first EFIT now, you can see why it didn't immediately lead to her identification. Her wry neck condition, the torticollis, it wasn't nearly as pronounced in real life as that sketch made it seem.
No, apparently it was quite mild, maybe barely noticeable to casual acquaintances.
But, like we discussed, maybe there's a strange irony there. Maybe it was precisely because that original EFIT was so uncanny, so memorable in its strangeness,
That it kept the case alive.
yeah, that it stopped Ina Jane Doe from just fading into the background noise of unsolved cases. If the image hadn't been so haunting, maybe fewer people would have kept talking about her, wondering who she was.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? In a really dark, roundabout way, that creepy image might have actually played a part in eventually giving Susan back her name. Public fascination, even with the macabre, can sometimes, decades later, push things towards resolution.
So this deep dive, it's really shown us the whole arc of a cold case, from this completely baffling, horrific discovery through decades of silence to a resolution driven by science, by genealogy, and just sheer determination not to give up. It's a powerful reminder of what these new technologies can do, finding truths that really did seem lost forever.
Definitely. But it also really underscores how, even with breakthroughs like identification, deep mysteries can remain. We know her name, but who killed her? Why the fake call, the graffiti? These aren't just loose ends. They're deeply unsettling gaps in the story. It makes you think, doesn't it? What does full closure even look like in a case this complex? Not just for the police, but for the family who lived through all that uncertainty.
What part of Susan's story stands out most to you? How do you feel the initial investigation, those early assumptions, or even that memorable EFIT affected how things played out? It's worth considering how a case like this, unsolved for so long, impacts not just the immediate family, but whole communities. The ripple effects are huge. If you happen to have any information at all about Susan Hope Lund's case, please do contact Detective Captain Bobby Wallace at the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Illinois. Any small detail could matter. We really hope this exploration gave you some things to think about. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button, share it with anyone you think might be interested in true crime and unsolved mysteries, and definitely subscribe to Horror Docx for more deep dives into these kinds of chilling cases. Thanks so much for joining us today.